In this video, I want to continue our look at the angle controls, and we're going to look at rotation. In order to start that, I want to come over here and I want to change the shape to the shape flat and choose to open that. And I'm going to come over here to the grain and I'm going to come over and choose splats 2. So right off the bat, we're going to end up with something that's going to be sort of a look that has a splatter inside of this rectangular shape. If I hold down shift and make a straight line stroke, you can see that's exactly what we get. Now, if you remember, if we reduce the spacing down, and here I'll set the spacing all the way down to 2, we're going to end up with something where these guys are going to be overlapping each other so much that it will end up looking like a stroke, something like that right there. So now what I want to do is I want to come over here and reduce the opacity so these guys don't build up quite so quick. Hold down shift and make a mark, and you can see now we get something that looks more like what we would expect from a bristle brush. Now you can reduce the spacing even more, and what will happen is that we'll get a denser mark. However, what will also happen is that the performance will slow down. So you want to be careful of lowering the spacing too much. Now, if you're using a medium that has water, then you can simply set the spacing higher and instead use the smudge option to get a very similar effect. But here, we're not using something that has water, so we do not have smudge available to us. Now, what I want to do is I just want to go ahead and make some marks with this brush so that you can see something that's really important to see, which is that currently right now, if I go straight up and down, we're going to be getting these thin marks. And if I go side to side, I'm going to be getting the fat marks. The reason why is because currently the shape is set to this rectangular shape. We have an angle of 0. And if you remember, the angle of 0 is going to be going straight up and down. If I rotate that, you can see that we're going to be getting slightly different results based on the angle of that rotation. So you can see that I get different results based on where I'm going with this angle slider. If I wanted to change this dynamically based on some sort of parameter of the way that I'm moving or the way that the stylus is moving, then I have some options over here under rotation. Now currently it's set to none. And this is the reason why the only control we have here is angle and angle jitter. If I go ahead and clear that off and I come over here and I choose follow trajectory, what's going to happen now is it's going to automatically follow the direction in which I'm stroking. And in this case, what we're going to be getting is the fat side. So if I go ahead and make a mark, you can see that it's always going to be giving me that fat side. No matter which direction I pull in, it's always going to be giving me the fat side. So that's why you would use the trajectory. And this doesn't really care what type of hardware you're using. This will work with any stylus or even a mouse. If I come over here and I choose the next one down, it's going to be pen tilt. Now this is only going to work with a stylus and tablet combination that's going to have tilt sensing capabilities. And in the case of Wacom tablets, this would be the Wacom Intuos Pro or the Cintiq line. So here I have one of those, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and begin to scrub. And what you can see is that as I change the tilt of my brush, I'm able to control when I'm getting flat and when I'm getting the thin part of the brush. This is going to give us much more naturalistic results. I'm going to go ahead and clear that off. And I'm going to go ahead and pick up a separate type of stylus, which is called the Wacom Art Pen. And now that I have the Wacom Art Pen, what I can do is I can come over here and change the setting for rotation from pen tilt to pen rotation. Pen rotation is something that you will only be able to use if you have a stylus that is the Wacom Art Pen type stylus, and you have a tablet that will work with that in the case of the Intuos Pro or the Cintiq. And what I can do here is I can actually twirl this in my fingers and have it rotate exactly the same way as it would rotate in a flat brush in the real world. And you can see that by that line that's in the center of my circle here. So I can begin to simply rotate as I'm making my marks and get very naturalistic marks, just the same way as if I was rotating a real brush in my fingers in the real world. And this is really, really nice in terms of controlling these types of flat, bristly type brushes. Now I'm going to go ahead and clear that off, and I want to point out something to you because I'm going to go ahead and set down my art pen. Now that I have my regular stylus again, you're going to think that it's not going to work because I don't have the rotation enabled art pen. But what I've really got here is a tilt enabled stylus. And because I have a tilt enabled stylus, it's going to automatically downgrade from pen rotation to pen tilt. And it's going to give me the same possibilities of controlling it via the tilt of the pen, as you can see here. It's not as nice as what we get when we're dealing with the pen rotation, but it's nice that Rebelle is not going to force us to manually come in here and make the change. It knows if you set this to pen rotation, it knows what kind of hardware you have. It automatically senses it, and it will either give you the pen rotation if you have an art pen, the pen tilt if you have a stylus that has pen tilting sensitivity, or follow trajectory if you have neither. So the best idea here is that whenever you're setting up these types of brushes and you're not sure what kind of hardware you might be using, or if you're going to be giving the brush to other people and you're not sure what kind of hardware they're going to be using, my advice would be to set it to pen rotation and leave it there. And this way, it will take advantage of whatever kind of hardware that the person is going to have. Now, why would you ever want to use none? Well, the reason why you would want to use none is if you're working with a brush that doesn't need rotation. What do I mean by that? Well, there's many brushes that don't need rotation. If you have a shape that is round, then you're not going to need rotation. And the reason why is because it doesn't really matter which direction you rotate in. The shape is always going to be circular and therefore it's not going to really change. Having it set to none will decrease the amount of calculations that Rebelle has to make as it renders your brush strokes. This will make everything render a lot quicker. Now I'm going to go ahead and clear this off, and I want to show you one final thing here, which is going to be the idea of the random start, which is going to be very important when you're dealing with these types of bristle brushes. So I'm going to go ahead and hold down Shift. I'm going to go ahead and make a straight line stroke. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing again. So I'm going to hold down Shift and make a straight line stroke. And what I want you to see is that these strokes are identical. And the reason why is because the grain position does not move between the different strokes. However, if we come over here and we choose random start, then for every new brush stroke, the position of this grain is going to be randomized, up or down or left or right. And as a result, we're going to be getting a different stroke. So I hold down Shift, I make a straight line stroke. You'll see that we get a very different stroke. And again, if I hold down Shift and I make a different stroke, you can see again, I get a very different stroke. So every stroke is going to have a random position of the grain, which is going to look as if the clumping of the brush is different on a per brush basis. And again, if you come over here and set it for pen tilt or even pen rotation, you're going to see that this gives us very nice naturalism in our brushes. Now, I would also recommend when you're doing these types of brushes that you also incorporate a little bit of texture in there, just so that that dab quality where the spacing is leaving a little bit of dab gets hidden a little bit by the paper texture, and it just looks a little bit more natural, something like that right there. So that's how I would set up a bristle type brush here in Rebelle. And it's something that I definitely recommend that you try because it can be really, really helpful. Now, like I said before, if you have a round shape, and here I'll just go ahead and choose shape round, and you're not going to be benefiting at all from doing rotation, my advice would be to set it to none so that your strokes will render quicker, because at the end of the day, you'll still get the advantages here of the random start because it has nothing to do with the rotation. And you're going to end up with a brush that just works a lot better. It's going to render much smoother. Now that said, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go ahead and reset that brush back to its basic, clear off the layer, and we'll pick up from here in the next video.